How's it going? It's Russell here, and we've got a few different pieces of news for you today. First off, there's a new proposal from the NDP that could see $500 to $1,000 going into the pockets of many different Canadians across the country, something called a Windfall Tax. I'll explain what that means. Second, we have some other ideas on how the Conservatives are going to tackle the rising cost of living. They've proposed a whole bunch of tax cuts. We're going to go over those and see what the response was. And third, we're going to touch on something that's an update from a previous video. We talked about the Canada Disability Benefit and how they're about to bring legislation forward. Well, we have that legislation tabled, and today we're going to take a closer look at it. First off is this proposal from Jagmeet Singh and the NDP. This is something that they've been wanting to implement for a very long time, a tax on excess profits. The NDP have been saying, well, all these big corporations have been making record profits with higher prices due to inflation, and those companies that have been making higher profits, well, we should tax them and then use that money to redistribute to families that are at risk, giving them $500 to $1,000 directly into their pockets. There are a couple extra details on this proposal, but let me show you the video from Jagmeet Singh where he proposes this, and then we'll get into those fine details.
And how would you envision distributing this money back to Canadians?
So the plan is broadly speaking, I'll just repeat the plan and then I'll get into details. The broad plan is the excess profits made by corporations should be taxed, and we redistribute that directly to people. We're proposing between $500 to $1,000. The way we're proposing that money get to families that need it most would be using the Canadian Child Benefit, increasing that by $500 and doubling the GST tax credit. So that combined will go to about 12.5 million Canadians. So that's a significant population of working class families, of regular families that need help. So that's the vehicle to distribute using the Canadian Child Benefit and using the GST tax credit.
So again, the broad idea is tax these companies that have made more profits and redistribute that money to Canadians who need it most. Now, Jagmeet Singh says that the way that they are proposing that this be done is through existing payment channels that already exist to get money from the federal government into Canadians' pockets. The first one that he talks about is through the CCB, or the Canada Child Benefit. That's sort of the data that the Canadian government has on who has children and what their family and marital status is. So the CCB is a benefit that will be going out regularly to Canadians with children, and he's proposing to increase that up to $500, as well as increasing the GST HST credit. Now, this is something that gets sent to Canadians who fall within a certain income range. If you're over that income range, you won't get the GST HST, but again, Jagmeet Singh here is planning on increasing this as well to get this money directly to Canadians. Now, you might notice a little bit of a trend through these topics. It seems that everybody in one story or another is a little bit frustrated with the Liberal government and Justin Trudeau. Jagmeet Singh likely won't be able to pass a proposal like this through the House of Commons unless he can get support from the Liberals. They're supposed to have some sort of partnership going on, but it seems like there are tensions between the two parties right now, so we'll have to wait and see about that. Now, this proposal, this cost of living, $500 to $1,000, is very similar to something that's actually gone on in the UK right now, and that's the UK Windfall Tax. Now, that is a tax that they've sort of been putting out, and they've been saying that they're going to distribute this to, again, the people in the UK that most need this money, while oil and gas companies are taxed around $6 billion. They say here that the tax will help fund a new package of benefits worth about $15 billion, and around 8 million low-income households will receive £650 to £300 for this tax. So we could see a similar thing here in Canada if the Liberals get on board with the NDP's plan, but whether or not that's going to happen, well, remains to be seen. Now, on the other side of the aisle, the Conservatives are just as upset about the increasing cost of living in Canada. However, they're proposing to solve it in a little bit of a different way. Let me show you this motion that they put forward in the House of Commons just a few days ago on Friday. So they're saying that due to these rising costs of living around all of these other reasons here, food's up 9.7%, inflation's not transitory, it's sticking around, there's restrictions and barriers on the growth of the Canadian economy economy. They're saying for all of these reasons, we want to do these 5 things. Number 1, we want to temporarily suspend the goods and services tax collected on gasoline and diesel. This would see that sort of probably around 13% GST, HST, whatever the amount is in your province, well, that amount get reduced by the portion that is the federal tax. So they'd want to sort of suspend that temporarily, suspend the carbon tax, eliminate certain tariffs, enable free flow of goods across the Canadian border, and curbing speculation in the housing market by immediately launching a national public inquiry into money laundering. This one seems a little bit out of place. Not sure it makes sense in this sort of rising cost of living discussion, especially because money laundering, while it is one problem going on, largely, in my view, is not the reason that we have high house prices. And actually, we're seeing a softening in real estate prices as of late.
As I said, this isn't a novel idea. Other countries are doing it. We're seeing some provinces trying to find ways to do it, just seeing that the people that they represent are suffering and need some relief. And we're just finding that the Liberals, Trudeau in particular, is being so political and vindictive that he will say no to every idea that we propose, thinking that he's hurting us. He's not hurting us. He's hurting Canadians. So we need to see some action. We need to see a government that recognizes people don't need a check from the government. They need taxes cut. The best way to provide relief for Canadians is cut their taxes, not promise them, a check might come in the mail and you should be happy with an extra $100 every 4 months. It's not working. And it literally is the biggest issue that I would say every MP is hearing about, and it's the cost of gas, food, and housing.
So Candace Bergeon, again, similarly attacking Justin Trudeau, saying, hey, Canadians don't want an extra $100 every 3 months, probably making reference to the Canada Child Benefit, certain old age supports that are indexed to inflation, sort of slowly rising up relative to the index, the sort of cost of living index that is the CPI. Candace Bergeon here is saying, no, we need to just be cutting taxes big time so that people can spend less money and the cost of living can go down in the short term. That's her take here. I'm curious what you think. Are you more along the lines of Jagmeet Singh and the NDP? We need to tax corporations and then distribute that $500 to $1,000 in a one-time payment to a bunch of Canadians through the GST, HST credit, as well as the Canada Child Benefit? Or do you think, okay, maybe we need to cut these taxes and that's a way that we can make life more affordable in Canada? Curious to know what you think about that. But third, we need to go into something that is an update from my last video, which is the Canada Disability Benefit, the CDB. Now, this is something that was promised about 2 years ago from the Liberal government, and they introduced some legislation last year that was pretty much empty legislation that didn't say anything about what it would be, how much people would get, how you would qualify for it, but just said that, hey, we're going to get this bill accepted and we'll figure that all out later and we can change all of the details about it at any time. And that bill was struck down when there was an election previously. Now, they've brought back this legislation quite a while after the House of Commons has begun sitting again after the election. But I don't have a lot of good news for you on this. Let me show you the bill and I'm going to tell you what I mean. So here we see the announcement from Carla Qualtrough, the Minister for Disability Inclusion in Canada, saying today was a big deal. We tabled Bill C-22, the legislation to create a new federal Canada Disability Benefit. This would be an income supplement that has the potential to greatly reduce poverty and improve the financial security of working age persons with disability in Canada. The bill that they introduced was essentially exactly the same as the bill that was introduced almost a year ago. This bill C-22 has the exact same name and essentially the exact same contents. If we scroll in a little bit here, you can see that, okay, maybe there's going to be some information here. We've got eligibility and payment of benefits as different sections here. But if we actually navigate to those sections and Canada Disability Benefit, eligibility and payment of benefit, it says that eligibility, a person is eligible for a Canada Disability Benefit if they meet the eligibility criteria set out in the regulations. So they're not telling us what the eligibility is here. They're saying, okay, maybe this is going to be set out in the regulations. We'll get to the regulations in just a second. suspend. Right here, they say payment of the benefit. Minister must, in accordance with the regulations, pay a Canada Disability benefit to a person who is eligible for the benefit, applies or has an application made on their behalf in accordance with the regulations, or meets any other conditions set out in the regulations. So these sort of sections that are saying, well, here's the details, they're saying, okay, actually refer to this different section called the regulations. Let me show you the regulations. They say that the governor and council may make regulations. This essentially means that the government can change any of these details, any of these rules without passing it through the House of Commons. They can change anything to do with the eligibility requirements, the conditions that need to be met in order to be eligible and to continue to be eligible, the amount of a benefit, the manner in which the benefit's paid. If you watch my last video, you'll know that any of these things that are in regulations that don't have these sort of defined criteria is stuff that hasn't been decided yet. This is stuff that they're going to figure out in the future. Now, there are a couple downsides to having this many regulations in a bill. First, it's going to be far harder to get this bill actually passed through the House of Commons. Unless the NDP fully hop on board with this legislation, it's going to be pretty tricky to get other parties to buy into it. The reason is when you have everything included here in a regulation, that means that your government can change that at any time and change the details of the bill. And I find it very difficult to believe that many parties are going to be on board with one party that's in power being able to change the amount of a disability benefit that someone gets paid. That could be increasing it or decreasing it on a whim, or the eligibility saying, oh, these are the people that are included, and then perhaps 6 months later they're not included anymore because there's been some regulatory change made to the bill. I think bills are far more effective and far more likely to be passed when the people who are debating them actually know what they're debating. At this state in the bill, it's very unlikely that there can be any productive debate held on it because there's just no information on the fine details. And as I always say on this channel, the devil is in the details, and if no other parties can determine what those details are, then it's going to be a hard time getting that bill passed and getting those people to vote in favor of something that they don't even know the details of. And when questioned about this lack of detail, Carla Qualtrough in the press conference that I'm about to show you does have a response. She says that, hey, we're being very, very careful in the way that we want to create these details and the eligibility requirements to make sure that when people are receiving this Canada Disability benefit, that it's not going to mess with their provincial benefits. Like in Ontario, you've got ODSP, Ontario Disability Support Payments. And Carla is saying here, well, if we don't implement this in the correct way, well, then people could potentially receive income from the Canada Disability benefit that disqualifies them from ODSP. So are we really helping people in that situation? Let me show you this video and then I'll give you my thoughts.
In our last year's budget, we allocated $12 million to work with the disability community to determine what the eligibility criteria is, to determine how we would assess entitlement. And it's really important to understand the interaction with provincial and territorial benefits. So, we committed to modeling this after the guaranteed income supplement, but with seniors, there isn't that complicated or complex interaction with provincial systems. I don't want to be creating a benefit that disentitles somebody to pharmacare from their province or accessible transit or disability support. So we have to see not only how this benefit and this payment would interact with income supports at the provincial level, but also services and other supports that people will be entitled to.
So those concerns are largely what it seems Carla is saying, well, that's the reason we're not putting these details into the bill yet, because we don't know how we're going to do it. We don't know how we're going to make it so that someone can get the Canada Disability benefit and still receive their provincial benefits, because there's so many different provincial frameworks, it's hard to sort of plug in, but we're doing that work. It does seem a little bit odd, though, that she'd table the bill now when there's no details around this, right? And just in good faith hope that the House of Commons is going to pass it through so that by the time it actually gets put into force, all of these changes have sort of been written into the bill. That's putting a lot of confidence in the Liberal government to actually get this bill done and get it all done in a way that is effective. With the summer session, sort of the time here when the House of Commons does not sit, it's very likely that this bill won't even reach second reading before the summer. So we're not even going to see debate around this bill that doesn't have a lot of details in it until like September or October earliest, right? So that's where we're at with the Canada Disability Benefit. I know it's a little bit frustrating, especially for the people who have been waiting almost 700 days since the announce of the Canada Disability Benefit with still no benefit implemented. But those are 3 different topics that we've covered in today's video. I hope at some point it's helped you out at least a little bit. Let me know in the comments what you think of everything that we've covered today. A lot on the impact of the high cost of living, this Canada Disability Benefit. There's a lot going on. Let me know what you think. And with all of that said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.